Okay, let's see. Are we? Let's see. Um, okay, let's see what we've got here. Um, testing 1, 2. Okay, I think we're good now. Okay, so everything good now. All right. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have Fiveable is transitioning now to a members only, basically. Like everybody that's here now is a Fiveable member, and so the numbers have gone down a little bit. We've only got 4 people in here right now, so maybe a shorter session. I'm not sure where this will go, or you may just have more questions. Now, I don't know where Emily is tonight. Emily's typically here helping us out with questions, so y'all are going to have to pony up. All right. So let's go ahead and get your questions asked. We've got a small group here. Y'all are here for some reason. So go ahead and get your questions in. All right. Get your questions in, everybody. And I will start answering as soon as they're there. All right. Let's see what we've got coming in here. All right. We have got a question. All right. So leading up, okay, Alan, that looks like something we can probably do something with. All right. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So as far as that goes, let's go ahead and answer that. All right. So how did Napoleon gain power leading up to the Napoleonic not era. I'm not meaning anything Napoleon there. All right. So yeah, okay, well great. It'd be good to see people. We are just kind of we'll see where it goes with having a smaller group like this. But as far as that goes, first of all, Napoleon benefited from the wars of the French Revolution. Okay, so as a young artillery officer, Napoleon had a chance to advance very rapidly because a lot of people were dying. Okay, so first of all, there is this whole warfare thing going on. Like before, under the old regime, Napoleon came from a noble family, but they were minor Corsican nobility. And remember that in France, about 1 in 50 people was a nobleman, and so it really wasn't that exclusive. So under the old regime, it really, he really would have only gotten to a certain point, maybe, to about an artillery captain or something like that. So for one thing, there is the military aspect of it. The other thing is that he was politically involved. Like he knew who to, basically he just lucky in the choices of friends that he made. He was politically connected. Also, he was an able general, and he kind of knew how to make things, just kind of publicize himself, okay, such as the Egypt expedition. So the Egypt expedition was a military failure, but at the same time, you found the Rosetta Stone. Okay, he brought all kinds of cool stuff back with him, brought some scientists and people like that. So he was a really good PR guy. And then the directory, the problem with the French directory is that during the reign of terror, people would shut up if they disagreed with the government. That was the whole point of the terror, was to get people to behave themselves. So under the directory, what you've got is a situation where, you know, people who are radical Jacobins and kind of longing for the days of the terror to come back. You know, they're like, oh, well, you know, when the terror was there, at least I had bread. And then on the other side, you've got the monarchists. And so the monarchists are doing their thing. And so you've got a lot of civil unrest during this time. And it's one of those things where, you know, they say that you try to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. And so the Directory was really just on some very shaky ground, and there were a lot of people that wanted to see something different. And there is where Napoleon, assisted by Abbé Sieyès and some other folks, orchestrated the 18 Brumaire Coup, which set up the consulate. Now, Napoleon, on the way up, now, of course, people thought, well, Napoleon's somebody that we can kind of like, you know, we can manipulate. They thought that they had this general that they could manipulate. Not so much, okay? So as far as that goes, that Napoleon then becomes one of the three consuls. All right. So the consuls were supposed to be three people who rotated like through first consul. And then Napoleon was elected first consul for life. And so after he's elected first consul for life, then that's only one step more to say, okay, well, you know what? People like me as first consul. Let's go ahead and proclaim the first French Empire. And so he proclaims the French Empire. And there you go. The rest is history, so to speak. So yeah, as far as that goes, I mean, he was a general, lucky to be alive, politically connected. Then he's got his military coup, establishes the consulate, first consul for life, and then finally the French emperor. All right. And again, Emily is not here to this evening to carry us. Okay. So let's make sure, you know, we get those questions in if you've got them. Okay. So if you've got questions, let's go ahead and get those in. I want to make sure that, you know, that everybody is, that your questions are answered, but we kind of need questions first. We actually talked a lot about Napoleon last week. Okay. So ask a question. It's right here at the bottom. Now we've got a little bit smaller of a group today. So, you know, no big deal, but let's go ahead and, you know, get that going. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Waiting on questions. Okay. Waiting on questions. All right. Y'all don't keep me waiting for too much longer, my friends. Don't keep me waiting for too much longer. All right. 9 of you are here. Okay. If you've got questions, let's go ahead and get them out there. Let's go ahead and get them out there. All right. All right. I don't see anything coming in. All right. I tell you, I wish I knew where Emily was, because that all right. Oh, good, 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 good. All right. So about that. All right. So good. Thank you, Miss Feenstra, for you know, getting some people asking some things. Okay. So here's the thing. So Alan, let's go ahead and talk about. And I was actually reading something about this because I've been prepping. It's kind of been my baby, this French Revolution series, and I've been prepping for the next segment of that on and off. And it's about the war in the Vendée, which is about a rebellion that was in this, you know, in this region of France on the Atlantic coast, not too far from Nantes, which is where, of course, we remember the famous Edict of Nantes. And I'm reading about what's going into this rebellion. The civil constitution of the clergy was something that was extremely, extremely controversial. Let me go ahead and pull this up. So that y'all can see this, because, you know, if we're thinking about why is it that, you know, Napoleon is reestablishing the Catholic Church with the Concordat of 1801. Okay, so as far as that goes, let me show you what I've got here. And this is a map that shows, okay, the civil constitution of the clergy required the priests to basically, anybody who's going to be a priest or a bishop had to swear an oath to the French nation and supporting the French government. Now, of course, this is an effort by the French government during the Revolution, around 1791, to bring the church in line with civil society. Now, of course, this is something that, a truly liberal solution would have been just to leave the church alone. But the church is being brought in to basically, you're going to be part of the nation, you're going to be under the state. And so part of this was the priests and the bishops would have to swear an oath of allegiance, which, if you think about this, that really a priest, their oath of allegiance is supposed to be to God. And so this created a lot of uproar. Okay, so just to show you here, that here is the percentage of juring priest or swearing priest. Okay, so priests who swore the oath of allegiance to the state. Okay, that was not a good idea. Let's look. Okay, so basically, there are some places where you can see that. Over 80%, 4 out of 5. Like you look around Paris, 4 out of 5 priests swearing the oath of allegiance. You look here in the in the southeastern corner of France, and you see again 4 out of 5 priests swearing allegiance. Now you go over here to the Vendée, which I believe that's what we've got. Let me just make sure that I'm not pointing to the wrong place, but I'm pretty sure that I am pointing to the correct place. Okay, so the Vendée, yeah, it's right here. Okay, so the Vendée is one of these areas. You look here to what they call Brittany and the areas around that, that you see here that less than 35%, or actually this says 35 to 51, but there are some areas here where over 90% of the priests refused to swear the oath. And so what happened here is any priest that did not swear the oath of allegiance was going to be taken out of their congregation. And so for the people in these areas, we've got to remember that France throughout the entire revolution remained predominantly Catholic. So you had the civil constitution of the clergy, which created a lot of resistance, in some cases, like in the Vendée, armed resistance on behalf of the clergy, and of course some other things going into that as well. And so then when you've got the civil constitution of the clergy, and then you've got de-Christianization during the Reign of Terror, where basically Christianity is declared to be illegal, and they turn all the churches into like Republican temples, as they call them. And so the thing is, what you've got here is the directory that I just mentioned. Now, during the Reign of Terror, nobody's showing their Christian colors, but once the directory comes in and you're not going to get your head cut off, then people are starting to go back into the churches and try to reappropriate them to Christian worship. And so Napoleon, knows that, okay, France is a Catholic country, but at the same time, he didn't want to forget about the experience of the Enlightenment. And also he had a good bargaining position because France had been de-Christianized, so Napoleon could go to the Pope. Now, the civil constitution of the clergy, the Pope said that this was completely illegitimate. But when Napoleon negotiates with the Pope and says, hey, I'm willing to bring the Catholic Church back, but on a limited basis. All right. So first of all, Napoleon said that I get to have the power of investiture, that Napoleon got to approve the bishops, which is something that the Catholic Church had never agreed to. So Napoleon could approve the bishops. And then the other part of the Concordat is that Catholicism would be recognized as the majority religion of France, okay, the majority religion and not the official religion. So Napoleon had religious toleration. And so from religious toleration, it's like you can be whatever you want, but Catholicism is the majority religion. And really, like, there's no law proclaiming Christianity to be the majority religion of the United States, but, Christianity is the majority religion of the United States. And so the church had certain privileges, like you see at the coronation of Napoleon. You had the Pope and several bishops. So Napoleon wanted to play up the, of course, he was a man of the people. And the people wanted the Catholic Church back. And so Napoleon did this. Now, the other thing is, it's good to have some sort of civil religion, in an empire. And so, whereas the Jacobins had tried to get rid of Christianity, Napoleon's like, you know what, let's use this to my advantage. So there were several advantages for Napoleon for reestablishing the church. But remember that he's proclaiming it the majority religion, not the official religion of France, not the state religion. Okay. And so as far as that, what type of impact did Napoleon have overseas in different colonies by European countries? Okay, now one thing, and this is actually something that I first ran into teaching Louisiana history when I was first starting my career in Louisiana. But of course, this goes in the Louisiana Purchase as well, that during the terror, like, in that time span, the government got rid of slavery in Saint-Domingue, which is today known as Haiti. So the government gets rid of slavery there. Now, of course, I think it was Napoleon's government that reinstituted it. They were going to go back into Saint-Domingue and make sure that okay, we're going to reassert order here, where the Jacobin government had kind of let it go. But Napoleon's expedition ended up being being thwarted. I think it might have been yellow fever or something like that. But Saint-Domingue was lost during this time. You had the Haitian Revolution, so you had this this massive slave rebellion there that ended up with Haiti being proclaimed as an independent country, which of course had a lot of, if you ever take United States history, which you either have or you will or you're doing right now, that actually made slaveholders in the United States very, very afraid. So Napoleon, he had visions of, reasserting French colonial dominance and an overseas empire, but really he was much more focused, I think, on Europe than he was, about things going on overseas. But there certainly were some plans, but, he ends up selling Louisiana. Napoleon was the emperor during the Louisiana well, actually, maybe not the emperor quite yet. He was still first consul at that time, but the Louisiana Purchase. And so he's letting that go because he wants to focus on Europe. Can I go over the Continental System? Okay, so the Continental System was a system to essentially what had happened to Napoleon is two times, the Battle of the Nile and the Battle of Trafalgar. Napoleon's navy and his allied Spanish navy, they failed to defeat the British. Admiral Lord Nelson handed Napoleon's navy two very significant defeats. All right, so that's something that we want to address right there. We got two very significant defeats for Napoleon there. And so Napoleon can't invade Britain. The Royal Navy is not going to allow Napoleon to launch a land invasion of Britain. And so what Napoleon has to do is he has to then he's got a lot of allies on the continent at that time. And so he says that we're going to have the Continental System, where basically I'm not going to allow anybody to trade with the British. And so the Continental System is essentially an embargo of trade with Britain. And also Britain retaliates with a naval blockade of Europe. And of course, when you get into U.S. history and the War of 1812, this is the context that you can apply to that. So as far as that goes, he can't invade Britain, so he's going to try to starve them out economically. Now, of course, the Russians decide, you know what, the British need timber, we'll trade with them. And so that ends the Continental System, and of course, that's the catalyst for Napoleon's invasion of Russia. So yes, the Continental System, effectively a trade embargo against the British in lieu of an invasion. And so how was Napoleon different from the rule of the French monarchs? Okay, so a few things about Napoleon. I was actually talking about this in class the other day, is that Napoleon, he didn't rule, first of all, as a divine right monarch. So whereas the French kings before the Revolution ruled as absolute monarchs by divine right, this would make a great comparison question for an LEQ, that they ruled by divine right. Napoleon had plebiscites. Okay, now a plebiscite, it comes from the Roman word plebeian. All right. So the Roman word plebeian, which is, the common people. And so Napoleon had an election, when he took, when the consulate was established, he ratified that by an election. When he was made first consul for life, he got the people to ratify that. When he proclaimed himself emperor, he got the people to ratify that. So Napoleon always said that he was, even though he had power, like a French monarch, he said that that power comes from the people. Now, again, as I mentioned in the Concordat, all right, the Concordat of 1801 with the Catholic Church, he is making Catholicism the majority religion, not the state religion. Napoleon sometimes is referred to as an enlightened absolutist, even though he's not ruling at the same time as Joseph II, Catherine the Great, and Frederick the Great. Napoleon was applying the principles of the Enlightenment to ruling France. Okay, so he applied these Enlightenment principles of religious toleration. Now, also the Napoleonic Code, which we'll get there in a second, and Napoleon is giving one set of laws to France. So Napoleon, in some ways, has more power over the country than the French monarchs ever did, because he's really able to govern France for the first time as a true nation, where they don't have all of these different local laws and customs that are getting in the way of everything. So as far as that goes, I think the main things are that he's allowing religious toleration, and he is saying that his authority comes from the people, not from God. And so did France accept the Napoleonic Code? Now, Victor, I see why Miss Feenstra called on you. Okay, you ask the tough questions, because I'm going to tell you, like, this is one of those where I'd kind of say sort of out of bounds, in the sense that I'm not really sure, and I don't think it matters as far as the exam. Now, it's a very worthy inquiry on your own, but for the exam, I think the main thing is to understand that Napoleon delivered one set of laws for all of France. And so what Napoleon really represents, and what we want to make sure that we're bringing out of Napoleon here, okay, is that what Napoleon represents for France is nationalism. Okay, so when people ask, like, why is it that Napoleon was accepted in France? Why is it that he wasn't resisted? Because wasn't the French Revolution about republican government or constitutionalism? And not necessarily. That certainly liberalism was a theme of the revolution. Now, where Napoleon may have controlled some elements of the press and stuff like that, he was a man that was promoting religious liberty. But the other thing about Napoleon, the biggest thing, is remember that the French Revolution wasn't just about liberalism, it was also about nationalism. Okay, and so Napoleon is really, for the first time, France is functioning as a nation and not just a patchwork that's under a king. So I think that that's something that is, that you need to kind of be focusing on. But that is interesting there. Now, from what I can see, and I need to read a bit more about Napoleon's study. And once I get through my next segments about the war in the Vendée and in the French directory, I'm going to be devoting a lot of attention to studying Napoleon and trying to be able to answer some of these more specific questions that go beyond what is actually on the exam. And the other thing to know about the Napoleonic Code is that it was based on Roman law, which kind of goes along with the whole neoclassical vibe that Napoleon was cultivating. That with Jacques-Louis David as his court painter, he was bringing out this whole, like, I want to imitate the Romans. And so the Napoleonic Code was based on Roman law. All right. Next week's topic, I think we'll do Renaissance and Reformation and religious wars. Okay, that's cool, because we're going to be kind of shifting gears next week into reviewing for midterms, because most of y'all have midterms coming up over the next 2 weeks. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And then after Christmas break, we'll start looking at the 19th century. Okay, but yeah, for the broadcasts that we have, and then there are going to be some Kahoot games. Be sure to check your email, because Fiveable is going to be mixing some things up over the month of December because they're going to be putting together these Kahoot games in lieu of the and not necessarily in lieu of. I'm not sure if it's in lieu of or in addition to these live Q&A sessions. Okay, so yeah, so that'll be happening. All right. As far as that goes, how was he such an effective leader? Okay, which I tell you, I mean, I think that one of the things is, he just, flexibility. I mean, he knew how to, I mean, he was in with the Jacobins while it was cool to be in with the Jacobins, and then he's somewhere else, and he seemed to have an idea of what the people wanted. And I think that that's one of those things that if you think about effective leadership, having an idea of what the people want and being able to listen. I mean, look at France right now. Hopefully y'all are at once in a while looking at current events in Europe, but you've got right now like the worst riots in Paris since 1968. So President Macron decided that we need to put an extra tax on diesel, which most French cars run on diesel fuel. So he said we need to increase the tax on diesel, not because the government needs the money necessarily, but because we want to make greater investments in renewable energy sources and stuff like that. And when it comes down to it, like people hear that kind of stuff, and it's like all they hear is gas is more expensive now. And so they are, out there rioting, setting fires, making barricades in the streets, and it has been a big mess. Now, the thing is President Macron, I don't know how much he's really got a finger on the pulse of the nation and what's going to be, what's going to be accepted by the people. Whereas Napoleon, from everything I can see, he did. Like, he knew what the French people wanted and he knew how to deliver that. So it's like the French people want the Catholic Church to come back in, but not quite the same way that it was, okay? Whereas when you look at the Reign of Terror, like de-Christianization, that wasn't something that had a great deal of popular support. So I think that that's something that, when Machiavelli says it's better to be feared than loved, but certainly if you can find a way to be loved, there's nothing wrong with being loved. I don't think Machiavelli would say like, hey, you need to make sure people, people don't love you as much. But as long as people respect you, doing what they want is a great way to stay in power. And of course, Napoleon, was also a military genius as well, at least when it came to conventional warfare and, not invading Russia and that sort of thing. But, he won several good battles, such as the Battle of Austerlitz. And Victor, I think this is good to note here. Is there any Napoleonic War we should keep in mind? Now, the exam is not going to focus like there was a few about like basically the wars were fought, and so it's not really about like military strategy or anything. Now, we would want to know Napoleon's rivalry with the British. Okay, that's important. The Continental System, and of course that Napoleon's invasion of Russia was a response, really kind of trying to enforce the Continental System. So that I think is important. His exiles at Elba and St. Helena, his defeat at Waterloo. But don't I think that you're much more likely the way that they write these exams to get a question about like, the Concordat or the Napoleonic Code or something like that. I think that that's what you're more likely to see on the exam than any of the military history, which I think is a bit of a tragedy because that's something that I think is some of the coolest stuff. But, I've been teaching this course for 10 years. And so, I still don't really have my brain wrapped around some of the cool stuff because it's not on the exam. So that's definitely a good question. But I would definitely just think about like the motivations for the wars, and not so much, not as much the wars themselves. All right, so we're done answering that. Do we have any other questions, Victor, that that icon there is just so funny. That profile picture. Okay, there I am there. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're, like I said, we're Fiveable's kind of transitioning a little bit. So we do have, I mean, even though we've got more people in here than we had in the A-Push chat earlier. So, good to see people here, but I'll hang around for just a little bit, just in case we've got some questions. I definitely would be more than happy to, definitely would be more than happy to stay here for another half. Oh, excellent. Okay, so we see what's going on there. Good deal. All right. And so why did France and Napoleon? Okay. Juan, since we've got time, I'm going to look that. I mean, that is actually a really good question. And it may be because of the British. So Napoleon, Egypt expedition, let's see, Egypt campaign. Let me go ahead and just pull this up. Let's just Wikipedia this and see what's happening there. Just because I'm curious. Okay, since we're here and nobody else has any other questions, let's indulge some curiosities about stuff that if Miss Feenstra's still here, she knows how sometimes like we mention stuff, we have to get on to like something that's going to be stressed on the exam. But this could be I'm guessing some sort of anti-British thing, but I really have never. Okay, so what we see here is Napoleon Bonaparte's campaign in the Ottoman territories of Egypt and Syria. Okay, so we see 1798 to 1801 here, of which of course overlaps with his consulate. And so it was so basic weakened Britain's access to British India. Okay, so defend. Okay, so go to the Ottoman territories to defend French trade interests and weaken the British. Okay, so when we look at that, we see that Napoleon's goal typically was to do something, was to do things that would weaken Britain. Okay, so of the Mediterranean campaign, a 1798 series of naval engagements that included the capture of Malta. On the scientific front, okay, and this is really the big thing about Napoleon is even though he did not win, he was not victorious in Egypt. This was like basically the beginning of Egyptology. Like there are things that you can see sometimes. Like if I were to look up the 7 wonders of the ancient world, okay. Didn't type that in correctly, but we'll okay, because there was a picture of the 7 wonders of the world that I found one time. Okay, so note here, this is a picture of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and you can see that before Napoleon, like people didn't even know what a pyramid looked like. Okay, like this pyramid here looks nothing like the actual pyramids in Egypt. And there's actually I saw a cartoon with Robespierre, who was executing with a pyramid. Let's see, Robespierre cartoon. Let's see if I can get this to come up. If the it doesn't look like it's going to. It doesn't look like I'm gonna be able to find what I need here. Oh wait, actually, there we go. Okay. So when you look here, there is like a pyramid looking thing, but again, it doesn't look the same as I mean, you can tell that these people have never seen the pyramids before, okay? That this has never really been a thing. Nobody's really seen the pyramids before. And so as far as that goes, this is where people are coming back from France, and it's like now people actually know what a pyramid looks like. The Rosetta Stone, people are able to read hieroglyphics for the first time, okay, because you've got here that you've got the the Greek language. So if we look at the Rosetta Stone here, is it Greek at the bottom or in the middle? I think maybe it's the bottom. Okay, so you've got hieroglyphics up top. Let's take a closer look there. Let's go high res. I should have gone high res the first time. All right. But it's going to take a little while, but it's going to be worth it. Okay, it's going to be awesome. So when we look here, we see hieroglyphics. And then we look here, we see the Egyptian Demotic script, like kind of the everyday writing, because hieroglyphics were only used for fancy stuff. It's not like when somebody's trading 2 cows for 8 chickens, like they're writing that in hieroglyphics. Okay, and then at the bottom, you see the Greek alphabet. And so what they were able to do was they were able to get this, and that was the key here to figuring out hieroglyphics. So for the first time, people are able to figure out hieroglyphics. And so you see that people are actually starting to study ancient Egypt. And, we're knowing some things that, that we didn't know before. And so as far as that goes, Napoleon was forced to withdraw. And of course, there was the Battle of the Nile. Okay, so as far as that goes, that was the first victory of Admiral Lord Nelson. So yeah, so Napoleon was over there to try to weaken British interest, but it ended up being something that was that ended up not being militarily successful. But then Napoleon's like, hey, look at all this cool stuff here. All right. Should we associate the Congress of Vienna with Napoleon? Yeah, you really don't have a Congress of Vienna without Napoleon. I mean, this is really, Napoleon represents, like the French Revolution, Napoleon represented everything that the old aristocracy feared, okay, that liberalism, nationalism, war. Okay. So the Congress of Vienna, the whole point of the Congress of Vienna was to try to hit kind of a reset button and to put France back together as close as they could. They can't put it together exactly the same way, but as far as that goes, thank you so much, Ms. Feenstra, for coming by and for sending your students. So as far as that goes, Victor, they're trying to avoid a repeat of this. And so everything that's being done in the Congress of Vienna, where Metternich's trying to ensure stability within states and stability between states. All right. So these are the two things that Metternich's trying to make sure that happens. Okay. So we don't have any other revolutions and we don't have any more wars. And of course, from 1815 to 1848, that was the case. And really, it's not until World War I that you have another truly continental war that's going to wreak havoc in Europe like the Napoleonic Wars did. So yes, definitely. Now, I'll tell you, I'd talk about the Congress of Vienna in the next unit. That's when I really focus on it. But yes, you definitely should think about that in terms of they're trying not to repeat what had already happened with the French Revolution and Napoleon. Okay, so Alan, as far as just a quick synopsis of the invasion of Russia. Napoleon was very good when it came to conventional warfare, but unconventional warfare, not so much. Okay, so what the Russians did, instead of like conventional warfare would say that you hear Napoleon's coming, you have an army right there at the border, okay, that you are going to oppose him right there. Now, what Napoleon didn't realize, what he wasn't really, I guess, prepared for is the Russians decided, let him in. Let him in. They employed Fabian tactics. Okay. Fabian tactics are tactics where you're trying to avoid a decisive engagement until you can do it on your own terms. And so as far as that goes, when we're looking at Fabian tactics, goes back to the Punic Wars, Quintus Fabius Maximus in ancient Rome. And so Fabian tactics, Washington employed Fabian tactics in the American Revolution, that you're trying to avoid decisive engagements until they're on your terms. Now, the Russians, so they basically let him come in. Now, they couldn't let him go into Moscow without putting up a fight. So you did have the Battle of Borodino, which I will, the Battle of Borodino is, let's go ahead and share the screen there so you can see that. And so the Battle of Borodino, they did this like right outside of Moscow. So it's like we have to defend the capital. So it is located 13, what? Okay, so where is that? Okay, so the district of Moscow. Okay, so it's right outside Moscow. And so that's where they fight. Now, this is a pretty big battle. what we can see here is about, yeah, so we said, wow, I mean, it's like 28 to 35,000 French dead and 40 to 45, oh, dead, wounded, and captured. Okay. So dead, wounded, and captured. And we see, wow, like including 47 generals, 480 officers. Same thing here. So you've got, I mean, this is a bloodbath. Okay. But now you can see here, by the time Napoleon gets to this battle, he's got less than 200,000 men. Okay. And so Napoleon's grand army, when he came in, okay, so, you know, this is, let me tell you, yeah, so Napoleon's grand army was the army commanded by Napoleon. Let's see, it was renamed. Da 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 da. No, 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 don't want that one. Okay. The invasion of Russia, okay, with 680,000 men, it's saying. Now there's a graphic that I think may be on this page that shows you, I mean, basically what happens is there are people that just starve, like they starve, they're cold. You know, you can just see that they're going through the snow here. There is a paint. We've got a lot more art than was on available on Wikipedia a couple years ago, but there is Napoleon retreating. And so Napoleon, you know, the Russians fight him at Borodino, and then they just get out of the way, okay, and they let Napoleon to Moscow. But Napoleon's when Napoleon gets into Moscow, then it's you know, it burns, and you've got the winter, and then Napoleon is in retreat. And so when Napoleon comes in, we've got over 400,000 men that are with him, and you can see here as he's going through, I mean, this army just eventually gets to you know, about 145,000 is what we're seeing there. And by the time Napoleon crosses back out of Russia, Napoleon's only got about 10,000 men. So, you know, and this is really, there was really only about like one big major battle. Okay. And so as far as that goes, yeah, there's Napoleon camped out in a church over there. So all kinds of interesting art from that thing there. And so there, yeah, Napoleon's not having a very good day during the retreat. So it's a very long retreat, and you know, it's just it is a disaster. I mean, it's a pretty big disaster, and it's something again that I haven't quite gotten there in my you know, French Revolution series. So I'm going to be looking in depth into some more of this stuff. But yeah, so you can see Moscow, you know, Napoleon gets to Moscow, and then it's like, okay, it's on fire. A lot of good it did to get here. And so as far as that, that's a little introduction to Napoleon's invasion of Russia. All right. So, yeah, so that's one. I think I may have already answered this, but, you know, the 18 Brumaire Coup is where Napoleon formally took power. And then, of course, through, you know, eventually proclaimed himself the emperor with the support of the vast majority of the French people. All right. So what made Napoleon be exiled out of France? Okay. Now, the thing is that once Napoleon was defeated, here's the problem, that Napoleon was a very skilled military leader and also very popular in France. Okay. So the thing is that, you know, they tried to put Napoleon on Elba. And then when Napoleon escapes, then the French just welcome him right back. They're like, hey, he's back. Let's just, you know, and then you've got the 100 Days. So Napoleon was such a popular leader. It's like the military contingent that was sent to apprehend Napoleon, that was sent by the restored government to apprehend Napoleon, actually ended up joining him. Okay, so they meet, and then it's like, okay, now we're all marching together. And then it's like, yay. I mean, because, I mean, Napoleon really represents France at its greatest moment. Okay. That I went to the tomb of Napoleon over the summer. And I mean, it was France's greatest moment. And they know it. I mean, you look at this and it's just like, wow, they have entombed him with, I've got a video. If you go to YouTube and go to Tomb of Napoleon, you can see the video that I made over there. And it's just, just like, oh my goodness, it's like in a church, you know, you got Jesus Christ watching over him and the angels, and it's below this huge like dome. I mean, it is very, very beautiful. But yeah, so Napoleon, the first time it's on Elba, which is right off the coast of Italy. And then, you know, the second time when they defeat him at Waterloo, they send him to St. Helena, which is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's so remote. It's one of the places where they had like this huge telescope because it was the place where the stars could be seen the best because there was nothing there. And so that's where they put him the second time, and they made sure that, you know, you are not going to get out. And he, you know, eventually just kind of died, you know, because I mean, that's a pretty boring place over there. So yeah, I mean, they had to exile him because you just can't. And then they're not going to. The other thing is, I think, you know, executing Napoleon would have been something that would have, I mean, that would have inflamed the French people and made a martyr out of him. So the exile was really the best way to deal with the problem of Napoleon, out of sight, out of mind, and nobody, you know, nobody killed him. There's not really a trace of him. His remains weren't returned to France by the British for several decades afterwards. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will wait another few moments just to see if we've got, you know, if we've got anybody. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So as far as that goes, after Napoleon, you have the Bourbon Restoration in France. Okay. So what they do, you bring in Louis the 18th and the Bourbon Restoration, which, I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, this was not an absolute. This was not an absolute monarchy. That it's a monarchy, but it's still, you know, it's. I mean, the monarchy's back, but I believe that. Yeah, it was a constitutional monarchy. And so, you know, and then of course, it looks like they bring the Catholic Church in even more than it was there for Napoleon. So as far as, you know, as far as that goes, we see, yeah, but that's the Bourbon Restoration, Louis the 18th, followed by Charles the 10th. And then of course, you've got the French Revolution of 1830, which then puts in another constitutional monarchy. So it's actually quite a bit of time before France becomes a republic again. That the Second French Republic is after the revolutions of 1848, and then you've got Louis Napoleon, who's elected president. And then what does Louis Napoleon do? He then proclaims the Second French Empire, makes himself the emperor. And so it is not until after the Franco-Prussian War in the 1870s that France is again a republic for any length of time. So, but yes, the Bourbon Restoration, Louis the 18th, that's what happens after Napoleon is taken off there. All right. So as far as that goes, all right. I tell you what, Miss Feenstra seems like a character. I tell you, I'd like to meet her sometime. So, but yes, thank her for doing all the great things that she does and for recommending y'all come over here. And that's been pretty awesome to hang out with y'all. And next week, y'all check your email because there are going to be some Kahoot events and some, so that's going to be really the focus in getting ready for that. Where do y'all go to school? Where's y'all's school located? California. Where in California? Curious. Tulare, almost like Tuileries, like the old palace of the French monarchy, huh? Oh, the Central Valley. I love the Central Valley. I was actually in Merced. Yeah, I was in Merced over the summer. That was a really nice place. I enjoyed my time over there. So yeah, I really like the Central Valley. So maybe I'll get back over there sometime. All right. So thank y'all so much. And of course, like I said, keep your email open and make sure you know when we're doing reviews and Kahoot games next week, because a lot of people are preparing to have the what do you call it? What is it? We're about to, midterms. All right. Or semester finals, as some people call them. All right. Oh, I'm always here to help. So looking forward to seeing y'all next. It's always a pleasure.